So again, thanks guys. Today we got Leo Bottary and Mo Fathelbab with us, two thought leaders in the peer group space. Gentlemen, thank you so much for doing this for us. And what I'm going to ask before we get into this, into the debate or into the deeper questions, it's more about how we all discovered peer groups. And my question will be, introduce yourself and maybe introduce a bit how you discovered the world of peer groups. So maybe Leo, you go ahead first. Give us a little bit of who you are, what you do, and how you discovered this world.
Sure. Yeah, I'm doing something today I never thought I would be doing. I'm actually the founder and managing partner of a company called Peer Innovation, where I basically take what I've learned over the years about peer advisory groups and what they do so well and try to help teams inside companies or inside organizations apply a lot of those concepts so that they too can be higher performing. I came from the world of corporate communications. I actually had my own company for 5 years. And if I had understood, this was back in the late 90s, and if I had understood the value of peer groups back then, I would have definitely been part of one for sure. So I think it would have made a really big difference. But I kind of discovered it in many respects in earnest when I was at Seton Hall University. I graduated in 1983, but bottom line is I didn't go back to graduate school until like that 2006, 2008 period at Seton Hall, where learning had changed quite a bit. Instead of this kind of one-to-one type of learning experience, this was collaborative learning. This is what they would have called cheating back in the early 80s, probably, right? But the reality was that they set up an environment where we had all of these students in this graduate program who were mid to senior level executives who had a lot of experiences, a lot of intellectual and emotional capital. And the professors, I think, wisely set up an environment where we learned most from one another, second, from the material that was presented to us, and third, whatever we could pick up from the instructors. And none of them would regard that as an insult at all. That's precisely what they tried to set up. And it was very powerful, very sticky. Not only did we learn more and learn better, but I have those relationships today. And then, of course, I went to Vistage afterwards, and we can get into that a little later. But then obviously being part of Vistage, which basically assembles and facilitates peer advisory groups for CEOs and key executives around the world, um, that concept came naturally to me in terms of being able to come to that organization and recognize, wow, this is really powerful, and it's become a passion.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I have tons of questions, but I'll let Mo introduce himself and tell us a little bit in terms of how he discovered peer groups. So Mo, tell us your story.
Well, it's first I got to thank Leo for something he just helped me connect the dots with, and that is a turning point in my education at the University of Maryland was when I started studying with a group of my peers. And so prior to that, I was trying to go it alone, and I really was struggling. But the years that I did really well and started to excel academically and get on the dean's list, I was absolutely studying with a group of peers. And I'll tell you what, I'm now realizing what a difference that made. But the way I got started was through the Entrepreneurs Organization. I was executive director. And while I was there, I fell in love with this concept and made it part of my job voluntarily. I traveled the world and got groups started. And in 97, I basically decided it was A, my favorite part of my job, and B, I kind of didn't like all the other parts of my job nearly as much. I had to add that nearly as much. And I decided to make that my life's work. And that's when I started Forum Resources Network. And boy, what a journey it's been, and what an amazing opportunity to experience life and to meet amazing, amazing people, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and all sorts of other people from all sorts of walks of life, which we'll get into as we get into the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thanks guys for that introduction. And so again, our goal with this is to introduce people who have not necessarily heard or are beginning to hear about the world of peer groups and the impact it could have. So I'd love to hear a story before we go into the why and to the how on how it impacted your lives and your careers. Again, just to set the stage of, I think all three of us here and everyone we've interviewed has that defining moment that they could say, this has transformed my life or my career because of my group or someone I met in the organization or at some point in time. So what was a defining moment for each of you throughout your experience in peer groups? Mo, maybe let's start with you.
Yeah. I could think of two, and I'll give you the more mundane one first, perhaps. But for me to leave my cushy or not so cushy job and get the courage to start my own business and to start Foreign Resources Network in 1997 was absolutely something to which I credit my peer group. So I've been in the same group since 1991. And, these people have been just an absolute bedrock of support and encouragement and motivation. And I'm not sure that I would have started my peer group or my business without that group. But on a more personal level, I hadn't talked to my father at some point in my life for about 10 years. And I didn't really even realize that I needed to talk to him for, a multitude of reasons, going into a whole history that I probably don't have time to go into. But I'm willing, but I don't think we have time for that. But, one of the members of my forum, my peer group, lost his father. And he came to our subsequent meeting. We'd all gone to the funeral. And when he came to our subsequent meeting and read the eulogy and shared all his truths and pains and misgivings about his relationship with his dad, I found myself in tears. I was one of 5 people in tears as a result of that meeting. And it's because of that single meeting that I think I have my dad in my life today. Because without that experience, I didn't think I needed to reach out to my father again.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's these vulnerable moments. I think a big part of it is teaching us vulnerability. That's a big lesson I learned throughout my peer experiences. The more vulnerable we are, the greater the experience and the life-changing moments. So thanks for sharing that. Leo, how about yourself?
Yeah, a bit different from the perspective of when I was at Vistage, and I was heading up like brand communication there at the time, and in late 2012 had led a brand refresh of the company. And I was doing a lot of focus groups and doing meetings all over the country and speaking with people and asking them, especially CEOs, how do you learn? How do you grow? How do you bring new ideas into your organization? And to say things like, well, I read books, I have a coach, I hire consultants, I go to conferences and events, I go to executive development programs at Harvard, Stanford, things like that. And nobody, at least in an unassisted way, was listing peer groups as part of their consideration set. And having been at Vistage long enough to see how incredibly effective these groups are for so many, and yet see how few people really use them and take advantage of them, mostly because they don't even know. After we were done with the rebranding, I basically went to the CEO and to the board of directors and I said, look, we're trying to sell a Mercedes to someone who doesn't even know what a car is. I said, so I don't really have an interest in writing a hardcover brochure for Vistage as a book. I said, but I would really like to do, and I think it was incumbent upon us, I think at the time as thought leaders in the space to say, let's step back and let's look at not just Vistage, but let's look at EO and YPO and Renaissance and a host of other groups. We looked at the True North Group's book, for example, that Bill George wrote in 2011, co-authored that. And we just started looking at trying to find how and why these groups are so powerful and to create a narrative around it so that people could get a sense of what this was all about in the hope that it would make it part of their consideration set. And I think it was during that time, it was that pivot and that recognition of how passionate I felt about it, about something that, again, is so amazingly powerful, and yet so few people understood what it was really all about, that I kind of just took that on. And after the book was done, I just kept running with it, and I've had a great time and a ball with it ever since.
Amazing. So let's dive into the question of the why and the how to choose. Let's start with the why. So again, our goal is to get this message out to people who have not yet discovered this world. So if they hear us talking today, and they're hearing you, Leo, and you, Mo, what's the pitch? What's your elevator pitch to why they should join a peer group besides the amazing stories you've shared? They may think, I got this covered. Business is going okay. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. Maybe they think they know what they need to know. So what's the pitch? I'd love to hear everyone's best elevator pitch from a peer group perspective.
Wow. All right, I'll start. I'll
Okay.
give Mo a few minutes. Not that he needs it. I'm not implying that by any stretch, but I think that we are all recognize that we are all learning and growing. What we know is that we learn better when we learn together. And why you'd ever want to put yourself in a situation where you are facing the challenges and complexities of the world by yourself, when there are other people who are sharing your challenges that you can sit with and you can help one another. And this is what, I think there's obviously myriad benefits to it, whether it's personal, business, or whatever. But it just really comes down to how we are so powerful when we work together, when we cooperate, when we collaborate, when we, share our real selves, our best selves with
Mm,
one another. And so I think this is where peer groups, because of the diversity of perspectives that you get, um, the depth that you can go into with a lot of these, challenges, opportunities, whatever they may happen to be, it becomes a really rich experience. It's not just like having a single coach or reading a book or whatever. We absorb concepts, and what we know is that the more we engage in dialogue around any idea, any new thought, or anything, the better, not only the better we understand it, but the more likely that we give one another the courage and the encouragement to act on those things. And I think when you have a group of people who truly um, care about one another and want to grow together, it's a very powerful experience.
thanks so much. I'm going to come back to that caring part because I know both of you do a lot of work from building strong groups, and I want to talk about what that looks like. But Mo, what's your pitch to the entrepreneur out there or the leader that's not yet joined a beer group?
I think Leo said it beautifully. I would simply say, I don't care how brilliant you are not more brilliant than having 8 people in the room with you who have also been through all the experiences and trials and tribulations of building a business. And so having 8 or 9 other perspectives is only going to make you that much wiser, is only going to give you that much more perspective so you can make a better decision. But I'll give you just a little bit more about that. So, when we first started in my group, I remember somebody brought up a cash flow challenge. And mundane as a subject as that might be, and today you could research, how do I deal with cash flow? And in fact, what the group shared was much of what you'll find today just in any article. Accelerate your receivables, decelerate your payables, tell your banker maybe they'll give you an extra line of credit. Tell your employees they may forego a paycheck. I mean, so those were all brilliant things that came up that, in fact, helped that person. A couple years later, when the same subject came up, it wasn't just about those metrics. It was also, I haven't told my husband or my wife.
Mm.
I'm worried I've got to pull the kids out of private school. I have to get a second mortgage on the house. Oh, and I feel like a loser. So you show me a book that deals with all of that and with all the metrics of dealing with cash flow. I think this is a much more holistic and complete process. And it's just in time learning, focusing on exactly what you need at the time that you need it. So it's really, I don't know of a better mechanism for helping somebody as they're growing and going through life, whether they're starting a business or growing a business or dealing with personal challenges.
I think you both nailed it on the head. That emotional part, like, it's plays such a big role in decision making. It's not just about the tactical learning or the solution. It's about making that decision and executing it. And oftentimes, it's that fear or the emotional part that blocks you from doing that. And that's where the group and the accountability, especially a group that's really strong and vulnerable. And I want to come back to that in a little bit. But so the very crowded world now. I mean, compared to 20 years ago, lots of different options, some local, some national, some international in scope. So someone sold, they heard your pitch, are like, I believe in Leo and Mo, and I want to join a group. How do I choose? How do I explore? What should I be looking for to make sure that it's right for me? So I'll flip the tables. I'll start with you, Mo. How do I find the best peer group for me?
I think if you're a CEO or an entrepreneur, you have a limited set of options, whether it's Vistage or whether it is EO or whether it's YPO, or, there isn't a myriad of options out there. There are a few, I could rattle off 3 more, I'm sure, as could Leo. But I think for me, the thing that's also important to not overlook here is there's a whole world of people out there who are not CEOs, who are not entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
So we have created peer groups for Harvard Business School alumni. In 2020, we started a program inside of Google, providing peer groups for mid-level managers of color in their global affairs division. And so this notion of having a peer group is really, I mean, my belief and my mission, on this earth is I think every human being deserves to be in a forum of their peers. And so if you don't have one of those classic places to go that I just rattled off, start your own. And you could look at Leo's book, you could look at my book to give you the blueprint for how to do it. but get in a group of people who are going to be there for you, who are going to support you, with whom you could grow.
That's amazing. So I'm really cool to hear that you're taking the concept and bringing it. I mean, of course, it works with any kind of group of individuals, but the fact that your mission statement is going well beyond just the CEO, that's really cool. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you.
How about you, Leo?
Yeah, I mean,
How do you choose?
Mo raises a great point in that it's really about the clarity, and you mentioned it earlier about the why, right?
Hmm.
So when you look at a group of CEOs, what keeps them and what makes that group work is they share the common challenge of having to make the decision for an entire organization. Just as the key executive has to make that decision, where some people they're leading, some people they're following, other kinds of complexities about being in a director or VP role inside a company. So whatever that happens to be, I think if you share that common challenge or that common situation, number one, and then you have clarity about why are we here? What are we really looking to do together? And what does that look like for everyone? And I think once you kind of reflect on that yourself and ask yourself, here's where I am today, here's where I'd like to be tomorrow. Who do I want to surround myself with that will help me make that possible? And I think, again, it kind of goes back to a lot of things that, had mentioned as well. And it isn't about always looking to a specific organization, but it's about how do I surround myself with the people that can help me do those things that anyone can do, but do them far more often.
So I'd love to turn it to your companies. I mean, I know you've built both companies that help create powerful, dynamic, vulnerable peer groups, but also take those lessons learned and apply it within a company. I'd love for you to share a little bit in terms of how people could reach out to you and how exactly you help either their forums, their groups, or their own companies and their leadership teams. So love you to share a little bit about that each. Maybe Leo, you could start it off here.
Sure. So I would put my practice kind of in two categories. One of them is working with CEO peer groups. Primarily, that's been Vistage and groups with Tech Canada, whether it's in the US and the UK, and trying to say, look, you're all together, and you come together. But what we know is putting in a bunch of people in a room and hoping for the best isn't exactly, there are oftentimes, even for groups that have been around a long time, to kind of hit the reset button a little bit in terms of why we're here. What are the promises we make to one another? How are we going to show up? What does that look like? And there's a framework that I work with these groups with, where I don't tell them anything about what their group should or shouldn't be. I just simply help them have conversations that I think allow for them to reach agreement on what do they want to look like 6 months from now, 12 months from now. What does that feel? With regard to companies, I see a couple of opportunities there. On one hand, it can be to take all of what we know works so well for peer groups and help people applying it to teams in their companies. But I also think what we're really going to see a lot more of, and this is what I think, Mo was alluding to as far as his work with Google and other companies, is that I think that many of the companies of the future who really want to be high performing, they're going to have groups and teams inside their organization, defined as the group is there so that helps each of the individuals be better contributors to their team. The team actually works toward a collective work product or, whatever goal they're trying to achieve, as a unit together. And I think that can be an extremely powerful formula. Think about, companies today where, you've got learning and development, right? And they learn all this incredible stuff about leadership and everything. And it's not, and the content is great, instructors are great, all of this stuff is good. But the problem is that when, when that employee gets all that stuff thrown at them, in many respects, it could be a fire hose, or even if it's in the form of micro learning, they still get sucked back into their work, likely with a smaller staff, tougher deadlines, all of these kinds of things. And it's very difficult. We don't practice in business the same way we do in sports, right? We just show up to game day all the time when we show up to our company. So these groups can really be practice fields and allow for individual development where they can actually be greater contributors to teams. And I know I'd like to see a lot more of that inside companies. And I think it's a powerful combination.
Awesome. Mo, how about yourself?
Well, I'm going to answer your first question of how do people reach us. And so forumresourcesnetwork.com is our website. And so I'll just talk about the Google example for a second, because, I'm obviously passionate about doing this for CEOs and entrepreneurs, and that's been our life's work, since 1991, essentially. But as it relates to the work with Google, if you ask why did they choose to do this, there are three things. One, to provide support for this group of underrepresented minorities, and two, to help them with retention, to keep these people on board. Because you know what? If you have connections, if you have friends, if you have meaningful connections, you're less likely to want to leave. And then three, advancement. So it's a leadership development tool. And having a group of peers with whom to grow, you're going to be better, you're going to be more effective at your job, and it's going to feel better because you're going to have people that you love because you've gotten to know them, be vulnerable with them, and get to have meaningful and real relationships rather than just transactional relationships. And so, with the CEOs and with the entrepreneurs, it's absolutely been proven for now 40, 50 years. This has been around. We've been doing it since 91. The new space, the new place to go, I think, is corporations. And to see the impact for the corporations, I think, is something that's really important to highlight here.
Love the work and love the innovation. So anything that we didn't talk about or cover that you'd like to share with everyone that is going to be viewing this over time? So anything at all that we didn't cover, now is your time to throw it in
so
here.
I suppose I should answer the part of your question that Mo answered, which was how can you reach me or the work that we do? And it's peerinnovation.co. So Peer, peer, and then it's Novation, Novation. It's basically, peers, people like me, and innovation, creativity realized. And it's kind of bringing those two concepts together. One thing you did bring up earlier, though, that I wanted to raise, and this spoke to something both you and Mo said about the just the perspectives, right, that come into a room. Mo, I'm sure you can relate to this. How many times has someone come in and said, okay, I've got this particular challenge and I've got to choose between A and B. And how often do they leave that setting realizing that this choice is C, D, E, and F, also that they never would have come to on their own, right? And this is what speaks to this power, of being part of a group like that. So, I certainly wanted to kind of just double down on that point, because that's I think one of the really powerful outcomes. And it can be so amazing when that member recognizes that, wow, I thought that I was stuck between here and here, and now I've got all of these other options to really think about. And maybe one other thing, and I think Mo can speak to this as well, because he certainly spoke to right out of the gate. But oftentimes it isn't really about what to do, but it's really about how you feel. How does that feel for you? If you've got to fire an employee or have a difficult conversation, or you are having cash flow problems, or whatever it happens to be, it isn't so much about checking off the box and looking at what right the decision is. It's about tapping into the very human part of that experience. And you're just not going to get that in a book in real time, in a real way that a group can give it to you. So
great points. Mo, anything else to conclude on?
So we've touched on this word vulnerability, and I don't think we've talked about it nearly enough.
Right.
So one of the things that I've learned in this work is that vulnerability is an essential component, and yet it is something that I think most people are brought up, learning to avoid it, or learning that it's a weakness. And maybe I'm showing my age in saying that, but more and more vulnerability is considered really a powerful way to connect. In the words of David Bradford, who's a graduate business school professor at Stanford, vulnerability is the currency of relationships. And without vulnerability, relationships remain superficial. I think that is as poignant as I've heard anybody say it. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown. I love her TED Talk. I've seen it 20 times and it brings me to tears every single time. But I think David Bradford, just in that one sentence, says it all. And if you're afraid of vulnerability, I would say that's a reason to lean into it. And I say that, I'm going to quote somebody else here, and that's just one of my clients, where he says, you're only as sick as your secrets. And when you think about the energy and the effort that it takes to keep a secret. Think also about how holding on to that secret in a way is creates a false sense of positive identity, right? So I hold on to a secret because I think that if I share it with you, there's some shame in it, there's some embarrassment in it, and by hiding it, I'm just having this false sense of, oh, you like me because you don't know I have this secret. Well, my experience has been quite the opposite. In fact, I think the connections I have and the amazing relationships I've developed have been because I've been vulnerable, because I've been honest and open. And these groups provide that opportunity because it starts in this little safe cocoon where you have confidentiality and you don't have judgment. And then you start to find out, oh my God, I'm not the only one. Oh my God, it's okay. Wow, what a relief. And then the circle can become bigger. It can go beyond just the people in the peer group or just a small group of best friends or family members that you might trust. And to me, that's freedom. It's a greater sense of freedom and feeling, at one with yourself.
Well, really powerful closing words from both of you. And again, I really do appreciate your time. This movement we're trying to begin and to start and to kickstart 2021 and to bring more people into this world. I can't thank you enough for helping us kickstart this program.
Thank you, Pesca.
Have a great day,
Thank you
guys.
for having us.
Thank you.